In the spring of 1999, Donna Hennard, hearing that severe storms were predicted, set up a camera looking out at her garden. She was phoning a friend when the storm prediction came terrifyingly true.
Oh my God. There's a tornado right out my back door. You can see it. Oh my God. Ah!
It is your ultimate nightmare. The world's strongest tornado on your doorstep. On May 3rd, 1999, the ultimate tornado, the fastest wind ever recorded on Earth, smashed through the state of Oklahoma. Wind speeds inside this vortex were measured by scientists at a never-before-seen 318 miles an hour. This is the story of that monster wind and of the other killer tornado outbreaks of the 1999 season. Above all, that tornado season will long be remembered for the carnage it brought to America's roads.
What is the height here?
In Oklahoma, driving into mortal danger were motorists like Stuart Ernest.
I remember seeing people, I mean, they were just jumping out of their cars, and their cars were slamming into the back of other cars. I mean, there was no place for them to go.
On May 3rd, 1999, a deadly tornado swept toward Interstate 35 near Oklahoma City.
Coming to the city of Moore right now.
Some terrified motorists sped to safety, while others abandoned their cars and fled beneath an overpass.
That blood stain, that stain off of the concrete there is where my arms were at.
As the tornado struck, Stewart and the other drivers squeezed precariously onto a bare, narrow ledge.
I kept my eyes open until I saw it coming, right until I saw all the debris where you can see the creek. At that point, I closed my eyes, and I could hear people yelling, oh God, it hurts, oh God. And then the sound was so loud, this sound isn't anything compared to the sound that this thing had. It was just violent. Something hit my shoulder, and I thought it took this arm off. right after that, something went through my arm right here, and I thought, okay, I can feel that, so I know this is still connected. And I just kept my head buried as much as I could, protected by my arms, and stuff just kept, just beating me. I remember looking over my shoulder back this way, and I could see the tornado going on, northeast bound. As I slid down this embankment, the first person I encountered down here was the Vietnamese gentleman. He had this arm in the air and a child in this arm, and he was asking me, my wife, where's my wife? And I told him, sir, I haven't seen your wife. I said, but you and I are the only two standing, and we've got to help these people. And there was people just bodies just every so, 10 feet, 20 feet, just scattered all the way up through that creek.
One woman's body, deep under debris, was not found for 4 days. She was the wife of the man whom Stewart had talked to under the bridge. Tragically, hiding beneath the overpass may have been the worst thing that the desperate victims could have done. When tornadoes threaten, overpasses have become the first choice of shelter for drivers. That's partly because of television broadcasts of this tornado. It was filmed by a Kansas television crew who got too close for comfort.
Go. Shoot it. Better floor. Shoot it. We're all right. Go. Lots faster, Greg. He's catching us. You gotta go, buddy. You gotta really go. Keep going, man. Keep going. Faster. No. Yeah. Lots faster.
An overpass offered the only shelter.
We want to jump out. We want to get in front of the van. Get under here. Keep rolling. Yeah, I'm rolling. Get up under here. Get up under the girders. Underneath the girders. Keep rolling, Ted. It's coming at us. Shove yourself right up underneath. Hang on to them.
It sounded like a freight train. It just passed right on top of us. People very upset. People underneath the girders of this overpass. They're still hanging on.
Yeah.
A little frightened. You guys just about didn't make it.
But this was a baby twister. Stronger winds compressed under the bridge would have sucked anybody out. Winds in these narrow spaces have long worried tornado experts, such as Dr. Charles Doswell.
It's a terrible place to go. We made the prediction that somebody would die taking shelter under an overpass because of that video. There's reason to believe that the wind actually experiences an acceleration going through one of those overpasses. It's quite likely, as happened here on the 3rd of May, that people taking shelter under overpasses will be pulled right out of there, blown out by the winds.
That's exactly what happened here. Silhouetted in mud are the outlines of terrified victims. And this was the heartbreaking scene as Levi Walton learned that his mother had sacrificed her own life to save him. Kathleen Walton pushed Levi onto a ledge, then stood before him as protection against the fury of the wind.
She was holding on to me. She told me she loved me. and mud was flying and dirt and debris. She told me to close my eyes, and it got real bad. She let go.
But the Oklahoma tragedy was far from over. Many more lives were to be lost as the tornadoes roared northeastwards across the state. This outbreak was the most devastating of 1999. But that 1999 tornado season had already smashed record after record, bringing human misery to some southern states earlier than ever before, though some stayed defiant, whatever the cost.
We just got married the day before yesterday, and we didn't get a chance to go on a honeymoon. This brings us together, you say.
Touchdown of the first major outbreak of 1999 came on January 17th in Arkansas. It swept on into Tennessee toward the 50,000 population of Jackson. On this Sunday evening, many were at church. By the end of the night, 8 people had died. 100 had been injured. And damage totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. The tornadoes devastated 1,000 homes. The Williams family had faced a desperate fight for survival.
The house was being torn loose, and just up I went. I mean, just a feeling of being just pulled up, straight up, in the air. There was a telephone pole looked to be about 4 feet, 4 feet tall, and from where I was up there, it looked that tall to me, looking down at it. And it wasn't black inside, it was more of almost like a light was in there with you. Not a bright light, but kind of a foggy effect.
When we landed, things started hitting us, and I just threw the kids into the ditch and landed on top of them, and that's when debris just started hitting us.
Things were hitting you at 240 miles an hour and breaking on your body. Extremely painful and terrifying.
You can't even realize the things that are hitting you when they do. They're just hitting you, and you know it's almost over. It's almost over.
I just curled up in a ball, and I had my hand on my head like this, which is a good thing because the toilet grazed me here, broke my fingers and my thumb and all. But it probably saved my life by having my hand there, you know.
I remember turning around, this huge lightning. It had spidered veins straight out. I mean, it makes you feel helpless, utterly helpless, small, minute, and then incredibly wonderful that we're still alive.
Just 4 days later, more tornadoes sped across Arkansas. The tornadoes were already being tracked on radar at the Little Rock National Weather Service.
Okay, it's got one with it now. Let me give you the coordinates on it. Yeah, I got a pretty tight circulation there in about 20 miles southwest of the city. I think probably a tornado warning would be good on that one. Longitude on the storm is 92. 10-08.
Okay.
Downtown Little Rock around 6:30. Yeah, that looks about right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay, there's our warning. 18 miles southwest of downtown Little Rock. It's gone. That's it.
All right, thank
Get it on.
Fast tornado warnings save lives. In 1999, warnings went out earlier than ever before.
At 6:14 p.m., Doppler weather radar indicated a tornado 20 miles southwest of downtown Little Rock, moving northeast at 45 miles per hour.
Oh my God.
Jennifer Newton was filming that tornado from her home. At first, it appeared to be harmless.
There's another one coming down.
And that's the tornado?
Yeah.
But then it got closer.
If you are in the path of this tornado, head indoors now. Go into an interior room away from windows on the lowest floor. Put as many walls between yourself and the outdoors as you can.
And closer still.
Come on in the house. Come in the house.
The tornado did hit their home, but they survived unharmed in a closet. Next in line was the Arkansas city of Little Rock. Evening brought the first casualties as a massive tree flattened a car. A woman passenger was killed outright. The male driver was trapped in the crushed wreckage. Among the rescuers was paramedic Andy Traffenstedt.
We basically had to cut the tree at the trunk level where it was hanging over the edge of the car just barely. Once we got that initial cut done, we took the Herschel, the Jaws of Life, and I took those, put them on the hood of the car. We raised the tree up. The tree was up off the vehicle, but we still had the roof down on top of the patient. So we took the cutters, started cutting the roof to get that up out of the way. Finally had to crawl in there. I crawled in there with the ram. It's a device that pushes heavy objects, wedged it against the roof of the vehicle, made that final lift on the roof.
In the back of the car, keeping the patient alive, was fellow paramedic Mike Bain.
When we were able to get him out and start working on him, the longer he lived, the better it made me feel, because all he kept telling me was, I'm scared. Don't let me die, I'm scared.
Amazingly, the driver had survived the tree's crushing weight. He was hospitalized, but made a full recovery. The storms were now at the height of their power. Half a mile across town was another major emergency. Rescuers knew that buried beneath this collapsed supermarket were a dozen or more customers and staff. Tornado sirens had sounded for hours, yet many people still failed to seek shelter. With such scenes of devastation, the relatives of those still trapped inside feared the worst. Inside the store, two men had been working in the pharmacy. One was Tom Horton.
The windows were going in and out from the tornado, and then I heard a high-pitched whistle. And so then I ducked where I was and covered my head.
The other duty pharmacist, Bob Howard, was trapped under debris.
He asked me to get him out, and I told him that I couldn't do it because there were two walls on top of him, and they were huge walls. When they got Bob out on a makeshift stretcher, he was coherent and he even gave us a thumbs up. And I thought he was going to be fine. Later, when he was at the hospital, he went in and out twice. And then they brought him back twice, but something like the third time they couldn't bring him back, so he passed away.
The death toll would have been far higher without the quick thinking and bravery of acting manager Katrina Hearn.
I could feel like pieces of debris and cement floating in the air around me in a circular motion. I could feel it on my face. And I just held my head down and just shut my eyes because I knew that I couldn't let this get the best of me. I just couldn't weaken and say, I'm in a tornado and it's all over with, and get scared and everything. And I just shut my eyes and I was like, oh God, we're gonna be okay, we're gonna be okay.
Just in time, quick-thinking Katrina slipped a flashlight into her pocket. Moments later, the twister tore the store apart.
There was a large plate glass window in front and it just shattered. It went all the way, it was coming in, so it came inside the store. As the wind came in, the front part of the roof just peeled back. Just kind of ripped it on back and then just pushed it down.
The whole store is pitch black and all the lights surrounding the store was out. I got the flashlight out and kind of like pointed it ahead, so if anybody were close to me, they could see kind of like where they were in the store, because there were still people running down these aisles right here, and if they could see the flashlight, like I said, they could know where they were.
Katrina's light guided everybody to the basement steps.
By the time they opened the door up, everyone was just like piled up here on top of the stairwell. It had already taken the roof off, and it was the air pressure on the other side of the door that just all made us pack up like sardines.
The terrified customers and employees survived here, although some were injured, including checker Terry Olive.
They call it a crush injury. Whatever hit my hand just cut this right here and open. My hand was just hanging. My pinky was just hanging by its meat. I probably won't ever be able to move it again.
Without Katrina's actions, the injuries would have been so much worse.
I think Katrina was real brave. Even though she was nervous and everything, she stayed calm for the workers, the employees that was there. She did very good in getting us, making sure we was okay.
Daylight showed the true extent of damage to the store, but the storm brought more than death and destruction to town that night. The psychological impact was devastating to many, including victim Mark Medor.
Well, I saw the tornado, as best I can tell, as it was directly over the Harvest Food store, and a flash of lightning in the sky silhouetted the funnel much as a camera flash would.
Mark and his family survived the tornado strike in a closet. But the house was wrecked, and the experience has left Mark deeply traumatized.
This was my tornado, and I think one of the reasons that I come back here each and every day is because it strikes me how quickly you tend to lose bits and pieces of the memory, the sequence of events. And as far as my possessions go, this storm wiped my life away in 10 seconds. And I think it helps me to remember every frame of that motion picture that, you know, is trying to play in my head each day. My wife is not able to come here anymore. It's too disturbing for her to see. And it's almost as though I approach it like a mother dog and a dead puppy. I just can't leave it. I can't let go of it. The sound, it was just absolutely ferocious, and it's just, you know, like what so many people describe here in the South that have been in these storms. It sounded very much like a freight train.
That freight train sound is known only too well to another of the tornado's victims.
My son and I started hearing a roaring noise, and I thought it was a train. We're about a block and a half from a railroad track here, and we've lived here for 13 years at this site. And he said, "No, Dad, it's not a train. It seems like a large truck or a large object was coming towards the house." And about that time, the house simply exploded. Threw me into the bathtub, and the next thing I knew, the tub went with the debris. I can remember debris hitting my left foot, and I thought to myself, if I don't pull this in, something's going to cut it off. Well, we came to rest in the backyard, just about where my son is standing right now, in that vicinity, and it was extremely quiet. It was at that time that I began to feel a tremendous amount of weight. Felt like it was coming down in on us, so I laid on my back, put my feet up and my hands up to push up the debris because I thought we were going to be crushed. We had truly been just literally drugged through the backyard and placed upon a mountain of debris.
The family had been about to move to a new home, but the move was causing conflict about what furniture they should take with them to the new house. The family were fed up with the argument.
So we said, well, we'll come back at this at a later date. Well, 24 hours, it was pretty much determined that we would take none of the furniture with us.
The January tornadoes had already ensured that 1999 would be a record-breaking tornado season. But now it was April, and the storms were still coming. Benton, Louisiana, April 3rd, 1999. The F4 tornado that hit this Louisiana trailer park was one of 4 that touched down in this one outbreak. In the center of the storm's path was the trailer home of Richard and Jessie Charbonnet. They had heard an ominous weather forecast.
They said we had some bad weather coming, but we didn't have any idea it was this bad.
The storm struck so quickly, they had no chance to hide.
The mobile home began to just tremble, and he pushed me down on the floor, and then he kind of got to the side of me, getting down on the floor. If it hadn't, most of our necks would have been broken.
And she looked at me and said, "What we gonna do?" I said, "Get down, baby, get down." And she said, "Where?" I said, "In front of this chair." And I tried to get out beside it. That's what the wall caught me. I saw the wall coming like a wave. You know, falling in. I got to close my eyes. I said, "Oh my God."
We were in the living room on the floor, and he was pinned in on the living room floor under a chair in the curio cabinet. But we were really lucky that we got out without any really bad bruise. Well, I've got bruises, but my neighbors over there lost their life.
7 people died in this storm. 100 more were injured.
you're looking at it now and you think, well, how did I make it out of that house? God was with us to crawl out from under that rubble and be in good shape.
One of the paramedics were at the hospital when he carried me over for x-ray. He walked in there and he said, well, how'd you come out? I said, well, I got my wife and my life. I think I did doggone good. So,
The tornado stayed on the ground for 4 miles. But far worse was to come exactly 1 month later. On May 3rd, multiple tornadoes spiraled down from a massive storm system covering the neighboring states of Oklahoma and Kansas. There were literally dozens of touchdowns.
Half to 2 miles in front of the one that's on the ground.
In one Kansas trailer park, there was total devastation along the tornado's path. Five people died here, while others had miraculous escapes.
I grabbed all the kids and we went down on the floor because the walls, I felt them moving in. I went down on the floor. I had them down underneath me like this, and the washing machine came down on my back and the dryer came down on my legs. So I let it down a little bit, stood up, and finally, I got a hold of my littlest one's arm and steered him out the hole here. And then grabbed my daughter and pulled her out from underneath me, and the dog went out, and my other son went out.
The tornado took just 20 seconds to demolish Steve Atherton's home.
It was almost like that Twister movie, you know, you see things just kind of peeling away, and that's exactly what it was like when I glanced back down my shoulder, back behind my shoulder as I was coming down the hall. The front wall of the trailer disappeared, and then the side wall disappeared, and it's just the most frightening experience I've ever been in.
In Oklahoma, the same storm system had built tornadoes of monstrous proportions. Amid the awesome violence were moments of awesome beauty. The supercell which gave birth to this stovepipe tornado also spawned a satellite twister, which danced gracefully on a carousel ride around the edge of the cloud. In the tornado's path was the rural community of Bridge Creek. Family homes spread across gently rolling hills, which until now people had believed would protect them from tornadoes.
Huh? It's about a half a mile down the road from us now, Gary. Okay, I'm going to stop here. We're going to get some shots.
Underneath this storm cloud, Chad Irwin and his family fled from their home in a desperate fight for survival.
It came right up to the water tower, raised up over the water tower, came down on the other side of the water tower, and then it came down the hill.
F5 tornado running through. It looks like an F4, F5. It's a violent tornado.
We took off running. The oldest boy was in the front. He was carrying our dog. The youngest boy was behind him. My daughter was behind him, and my wife was carrying the other dog.
Chad had an emergency tornado plan. He knew exactly where to hide.
He ran down right here. He went in there. And that's back in there.
Violent tornado on the ground.
The family were still in mortal danger, pelted with debris and being sucked out by the storm.
I leaned over both of them and told them goodbye because I thought I was going to buy it. There was a big piece of jagged metal right here, and it just kept hitting the side. And then the big piece of carpet wrapped around these trees right here, and then the remaining flat came over.
The carpet and tree covered the drain and saved their lives.
Then I came up here and tore a place right here from about here to here, and I crawled out here, and I came up here, and I stood up, and it was sitting right there on the top of the hill. My family and me, we kept thinking, where's that train that everybody talks about, that you hear the sound of a train? We didn't hear no sound of a train. All it was that's all it was. There wasn't no woo-woo or any of the click-clacks that everybody's talking about. You can hear the sound of the track. There wasn't none of that. I didn't hear nothing but just wind.
Oh my
Look at the stuff in the air. Oh, look at the stuff.
Yeah.
Debris.
In a deep gully, this frame is all that's left of his mobile home.
The boys' bedrooms were right down there where that trash is right now. The utility, the kitchen, and the back porch was right on the other side of this stump right here. That's a picture of the house, the way it used to look. It's a solitaire modular home.
Chad knew his home could not have survived, but the ease with which the tornado demolished its next target surprised even him.
It was just one big black curtain. They made a jog like that, and then it headed right for the church. And then it picked up the 26,000 square foot church and just held it like this for a minute, and then it just slammed it back down to the ground and it just exploded.
The Bridge Creek Church was utterly demolished. All that remains is a building site and a new tent for services to continue.
This morning to commit before God, to commit this morning.
Bridge Creek was to be the greatest scene of tragedy of 1999. 12 people died here. Many of the bodies were found over the next 24 hours, thrown into the man-made lakes which dot the area. A mile from the church, this is all that remains of a house hit by the full fury of the wind. Fighting for his life inside this building was Mike Furnick. Mike suffered a punctured lung, fractured ribs, and a damaged spleen. His injuries came from the swirling debris from his own home, smashed into his body by the force of the wind. Everything that hit him did damage.
It's amazing the debris is flying around. Just the little bits of sand and dirt hurt intensely. I think they said that some of the winds were 300 miles an hour. You know, while you think 300 miles an hour is fast, but until it hits you, you don't realize how hard that hurts. It's like being sandblasted.
Eric, Mike's son, was also inside the house.
So I started throwing stuff out of a closet to make room for us. And I grabbed Eric and wrapped myself around him, just tied him up in a little knot. The closet was shaking. I was trying to hold on to it with one hand. And we went sliding with it, and then it hit right in the back with something. It was large, and it hit me hard. That's where it broke my ribs, I guess. But then the bricks started hitting me. It paralyzed me for a second.
And I relaxed my grip on Eric, and he started floating up in the air. And I grabbed him and pulled him back down. I just wrapped myself all the way around him harder than ever. I figured I was going to have to take both of us.
Eric suffered little more than a scratch.
Pretty tough kid.
But holding on to Eric as he did, Mike surely saved his life.
That's all you can do to save your kids.
The tornado's next strike was the Oklahoma City suburb of Moore. In its path was the home of Paul Kevitt.
Ear started popping in the house, and as soon as that happened, we got in the bathtub, and I laid on top of put a comforter over and laid on top of my wife. And then I remember the windows breaking, and I'm yelling at her, "Here we go." I looked up in the sky, and the amount of trash and debris is just being thrown through the air. And we're talking maybe 500-600 feet in the air. I couldn't believe it. I can show you the bathtub. Let me walk around here. There's some nails and stuff, so.
As Paul picked over the wreckage of his home, the full extent of the tornado's devastation was already being assessed by teams of scientists. They estimate tornado strength by examining the damage it has caused. Then a rating is assigned on the Fujita scale, ranging from F0, the weakest, to F5, the most destructive. Clues to the wind speed can come from establishing what happened to vehicles.
In this garage where I'm standing, there was a red Ford Escort, and after looking for it for a while, we found it, and it's in a field more than a quarter mile away, maybe almost a half mile away. And that's amazing. That's F5 damage. That means it was picked up out of a house, essentially out of a closed garage, and thrown at least a quarter mile in the air as a missile. We consider that F5 damage.
Winds like that can also devastate homes and injure people, as Paul Kevitt knows only too well.
I got 9 staples up here, and I had a stick in my elbow we had pulled out. My neighbor, he got thrown from his house. I found him crawling in this field out here, and we started taking care of him. So, my neighbor, I remember him talking to me. I don't remember what he said, but I just remember the sound of his voice. I grabbed the dog and we got in the closet. We have just a little tiny dog about that big. And then I started hearing just everything snapping, all the framing in the house. It felt like something just real slow and big snapped at first. And then after that, it seemed like everything went real fast. I think I heard the windows exploding and my ears were popping. And as I tried to hold the dog a little bit tighter, the wall that I was sitting back on began to lift up. I was afraid I was going to hurt the dog, so I was trying to reposition it, but it just slipped out of my hands. And then I was picked up again, and I was thrown face first into some mud, and I just started screaming for help.
Jeff Poole's home was also demolished, but the closet where he hid has been identified by the scientists.
He was sitting in his closet, right? It's the closet right here. And they found him over there where those shoes are, about maybe 30, 40 yards to our northwest. And he was blown there. And he's still in the hospital from lacerations of his legs, and they removed his spleen, I guess, also. So, bad stuff. You can see there's no wall standing. And you really can't find the walls, they're gone. A lot of the debris is from the other houses that have fallen out of this house. So it's almost for sure a classified F5.
The team also set out to find Jeff Poole's car. It wasn't this twisted ball of 2 or 3 vehicles, nor this one, a quarter of a mile away. But finally they found it. Jeff Poole's car smashed under a bridge half a mile from where it had started out.
There it is.
Oh, wow. That's underneath the 134th Street Bridge?
Yes.
So that confirms it. At 2208, 127th place, in Moore, the damage was F5. Detailed maps have now been produced of all the tornado tracks. Statistics also show one amazing feature.
There were no people between the ages of 4 and 24 killed. There were essentially no school-age children killed at all in the tornado. And the probability of that occurring based on the long-term historical record of the ages of people who get killed is less than 1 in 1,000. And I think we can credit a large part of it to effectively educating school children about what they're supposed to do for safety.
But many of the children who did survive have been left homeless. They show amazing resilience in the face of disaster. For them, it is the little things that matter. The loss of irreplaceable childhood toys. But for the adults, the emotional cost of the Oklahoma tornado is immeasurable. The financial cost is well in excess of $1 billion. However, there is no guarantee that Oklahoma will remain America's most costly tornado.
Tornado fatalities tend to be very erratic, irregular. They'll go along at a more or less ordinary level for a while, and then all of a sudden you'll have a disaster. And I think we as a nation are ripe for another disaster. If a tornado could happen to go down the crowded freeways of a major city at rush hour, a tornado could do untold damage.
Charles Doswell's prediction almost came true just 3 months later, when a tornado struck again at the very heart of a major city.
Oh my God! It's right across the street from this. I can't breathe! You cannot believe what has just happened. A tornado has gone through downtown Salt Lake.
Watching from a downtown parking lot and commentating by cellular phone was local TV weatherman Sterling Poulsen.
Where we're standing, the winds were about 40 miles an hour, maybe a little bit higher in gusts. But as the tornado was about a half a block away, the air pressure went down so quickly. I mean, it was hard to breathe. It was almost like the wind was being sucked right out of you. As it hit the Delta Center there was a tremendous amount of damage. The windows were blowing out, the roof was tearing off, and then it hit the Wyndham Hotel, continued across a tent.
But it has done some major damage here in downtown Salt Lake City. You can see the rotation in the clouds right above downtown Salt Lake. There's certainly some explosions just to the south and west of the Delta Center. This is a major tornado for Salt Lake City.
The tornado was rated as an F2 with wind speeds of up to 157 miles per hour and a 4-mile damage track. On the ground for 14 minutes, it injured 80 people and killed 1 man. Only the second tornado fatality ever recorded in the state of Utah.
It's a very unusual occurrence. Probably we get 2 tornadoes in Utah a year, and they're certainly not of the caliber this tornado was, and they don't usually go through highly populated areas. So I would say this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime experience for anybody living in Utah.
So the 1999 season ended as it began, with fatalities and terrifying winds, and tornado records broken time and time again.